Ready? Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It is Wednesday, January 10th, 2018, and on the agenda tonight is the Town Council and School Committee joint work session. I would ask everybody to please rise and join us in the pledge. Thank you, everyone. Moving on, this is the Capital Improvement Program for the fiscal year 2018 and 19 through 23 and 24. And I don't know who would like to start, but Kristen, if you'd like to start, or Steve, if you want us to start first.
Good evening. I'm here to present to you the 2018-19 capital budget and the one going out 22 to 20 to 24. A capital project is a major non-occurring tangible fixed asset with a useful life of 5 years and a value of more than $10,000. The areas of focus that we'll be focused on this evening is the 6-year capital plan. I'd like to remind the council and the school committee that 17-18 is the current year we're in, and we'll be focusing on 18-19 for what we'll be doing in the years out after that. A capital improvement plan is just that. It is a plan. It is a long-range plan, typically 5 to 6 years, which identifies capital needs in the district and provides a funding schedule and timeline for implementation. The capital improvement plan allows for a systematic evaluation of all projects at one time so that district can anticipate future needs. Don't mind me, I'm new with this clicker. The capital improvement plan should not include routine maintenance expenses of the districts, but should include required upkeep of facilities, included but not limited to roof repair, heating, ventilation system repairs, window and door replacement. Under Rhode Island general laws, we're allowed to receive housing aid for our capital improvement plan. RIDE usually award housing aids within the amount as such time as authorized under Rhode Island general laws. Currently, the reimbursement for the South Kingston School is 35%. There are some eligible incentives on that 35%, such as green schools and things of that nature. Based upon the recommendation of the Rhode Island Building Task Force, the minimum reimbursement percentage will remain at 35%, but they may be increased up to 50%, and we heard maybe up to 60% based on bonuses and incentive eligibility. What we're hearing a lot from the task force is newer and fewer. I think in the next coming few months, we'll probably have a better idea as to what the governor, the General Assemblies, and also the General Treasurer's plan as it relates to the housing aid as a result of the Jacobs report. Yeah, see, this keeps flicking on me. Necessity of construction. Necessity of construction is the application process that we are required to go through in order to receive the 35% reimbursement. The application process is a 5-stage process. What we'll focus on this evening is the first 2 stages. We'll mention the 3rd, 4th, and 5th stage, but that is after the projects have been constructed and approved and moving forward. The application, we must prioritize them. We submit it to an authority board, and eventually it will go to the Council of Higher Education. Stage 1 identifies the needs. It requires the school district to submit a letter of intent as well as a commitment to follow the school construction regulations and applicable statutes and regulations. During Stage 1, LEA conducts a facility condition assessment, prepares demographic projections, provide education programs for each school facility. Through a careful study of these factors, LEA attains a comprehensive understanding of the district-wide capacity enrollment trends, and the alignment of existing facilities to the education program being offered at each school. Stage 2, the LEA usually works with, or does work with, either an architect or an engineering team for the purpose of finalizing the numbers before submitting or coming up with numbers that are more realistic than what we've been working with. There's a lot of design documentations that is provided and then is submitted to RIDE. And RIDE from there, it goes to the advisory board and then the Council on Education and Secondary Education. The timeline for stage 1 and 2 has been outlined and documented in the regulations from RIDE. This is a specific timeline that must be adhered to. There's no exceptions. A letter of intent must be submitted sometime in the latter part of August, early September. We usually receive notification from RIDE. Stage 1, which is the application must be submitted in October. Stage 2, in February. Final improvement is done by the elementary and secondary education. They vote in May. The last 3 stages of the necessity construction is design. During the design phases, this is after they approved our projects, and we're in the process of designing and coming up with documentations to bid these projects out. What we are required to do is meet with RIDE to go over those documentations probably prior to a formal bidding process. At that point, RIDE does provide some feedback regarding the bidding documentations. The 4th stage is the funding stage. This is after the project is completed. We must submit to RIDE documentation outlining what projects have been done, the costs associated with them, and other documentation when necessary. Stage 5 is what's called asset protection. We are required to submit an asset protection to RIDE every year, outlining how we're going to maintain our facilities in the coming years. I just want to, as a reminder, the necessary to school construction requirements and procedures, as well as the reimbursement levels that we just spoke about, may change in the coming year as a result of the Jacob report. The specifics are not available at this time. As we said, they're still in the design phase or drafting phase with a number of state officials. And the information that we currently are sharing with you are what we know at this point and what's available on the website. Projects through fiscal 2018-19 are based on a facility audit completed in 2013 and have been approved via the necessity of school constructions. Project beyond 18 and 19 are based on ongoing assessments based on in-house determination. As we move forward with the applications in the future with the necessity of construction, I see these numbers changing, and they'll probably change even as we review them from year to year based on updated information we may have about our facilities. In January 2017, during the fiscal 2018-24 capital improvement discussion, it was determined that with the continued decline in enrollment, the district should seek proposal from a professional education and facility planning firm to provide a comprehensive long-term 20-year education and facilities plan. On April 4th, 2017, after public interviews of 3 vendors' proposals, the school committee awarded the contract to RGB Architects. RGB commenced work in May and is currently on task to have a final report in late January, possibly early February. That's what we have been working on since last April. You folks have been involved with that pretty active, and we've had numerous meetings in that regard. Now to get to the actual projects that we are proposing. As I stated earlier, 2017-18 is the current year. As a reminder, we decided last year during the budget process that it would be in the best interest that we hold off on projects in 17-18 as we move forward with the facility studies. So we did do just that. In 1819, the Hazard School, we don't anticipate doing any work at that school, and we don't anticipate doing any work at that school in the coming years. South Road, we have nothing slated for 1819. We do have some small projects in the early 2019, 2019, and 20. And we're looking to do major door replacement and window replacement in 22, 23. Administration at this point also, we don't anticipate any projects in the next 6 years. The high school, we've done a lot of work at the high school, and we continue to do work at the high school. In this upcoming year, we'll be looking at emergency lighting, replacing the original roof, and the boiler chimney roof also needs some repairs. In the out years, we're looking at fire alarm system upgrades, boilers, exterior door replacement, library renovations, as well, and also auditorium renovations. Curtis Corner Middle School, we have nothing slated for this 18-19 year. In the out years, we are looking to replace some unit ventilators and also a boiler replacement.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Regarding Curtis Corner, I thought I had seen something before regarding the parking lot. Is
The
that
paving is one of the last ones, slides.
okay?
Broad Rock, we have some emergency, this is plumbing fixtures repairs that we'll be doing in this coming fiscal year. And the out years, we really don't have anything planned at this point. Matunic School, we would like to replace the HVAC electrical systems this 18-19 fiscal year. We're waiting to see what happens with the report that will be seen from Hendricks. I am concerned that we may not be able to meet this timeline. Our construction season is a short construction season, and it's my understanding there are some lead times associated with some of the equipment that we will be purchasing. However, we will vet that out in the coming weeks. Peasedale School, we're also looking to do some roof work this coming year. Wakefield School, we have nothing slated for this coming fiscal year. In the out years, you see similar things that you're probably seeing with all the other elementary school, boiler replacement, exterior doors, and windows. West Kingston, also we don't have anything slated for this year. The HVAC electrical, we're slating for next year. Again, we'll see what happens when the Hendricks reports is presented to the school committee. District paving parking lots, all districts have paving, and I want to just be clear, it's not really paving, it's paving and basically reconstruction of the parking lots. What we'll also do, which will require us to do, is do a complete traffic study of these parking lots. We do have some concerns with some of the parking lots, and some of the flow has been somewhat problematic that we think we really need to address. And that will happen as we do its paving reconstruction of parking lots. And this is the total for fiscal 18-19. We're looking for a total of $1.8 million worth of work, almost $1.9 million. The total 6-year capital is $8.1 million.
Would it be okay to ask a couple questions? Just looking at this, there's 3 schools or 3 buildings on here that there's nothing slated for in the next 6 years, and I'm just wondering, is that a result of you waiting for the report to sort of judge any kind of maintenance you're going to be doing, or is there truly no maintenance to be done on those buildings in 6 years?
This is more of a capital improvement, not maintenance, and with some of the schools, for instance, I know Broad Rock is one of the more relatively new schools. Mm-hmm. And like I said, this is a capital plan as we go through in the coming years, maybe in an out year next year, we may see some need to do something, but at this point, it's based on our assessment that we have currently in place.
I guess I was just looking, when I say maintenance, I think of sort of preventative care, large projects. Like, for example, we just went through our capital improvement plan for the municipality, and, we're replacing roofs and also HVAC systems and windows and things like that, and, planning for them. So I was surprised to see that, especially a building like Hazard doesn't have any maintenance requirements like that for the next 6 years. I didn't know if there was, and then this could be just how you guys do it, but, Steve is a planner, as we all know, and we always see things where it's like, oh, it's not even a problem yet we're setting aside money for it. So I just thought it was
So that's what you're seeing in our documents. We put, as you all know, quite a bit of money into the high school in terms of the hallway restorations and the roofs. We have taken out of our operational budget and put brand new water fountains in every school in the district, and redid the plumbing to increase our water quality. So that didn't come out of the capital plan. And we're in very good shape in terms of roof. And we have boilers that we don't think that in 2 years, I think it was the Curtis Corner boiler will go, but if it's getting close to going, we'll move it up. It's a planning document, so you'll move it up closer. And if we're assessing it and the experts who are servicing it are saying it can hang on another year and still be very confident that it will turn on and heat the entire building, then you'll see us push it to an out year and bring forward something that's a little bit more of an urgent matter. But we're in pretty good shape in terms of the capital plan because we've invested in the past. The really two tricky ones have been the HVAC at the two buildings, and we're going to take our lead from the report that starts to come out next week, and then we'll finalize in February and decide when and if those projects will transpire.
And just a quick note, I noticed during the really cold spell, the terrible cold spell that we had, you guys advertised that you were going to warm up the buildings over the weekend in preparation for the students coming back. And seeing in the news recently some schools that did not do that and saw some pipes burst and massive damage, I just thought that was a great proactive move. And we're lucky that we had somebody to make that call.
Thank you.
I also would just like to add a point that I, heard on the news today, actually, and yesterday. I'm a little saddened to think about the conditions of some of the schools outside of our community. I think you all do a very, very good job in planning and in wrapping your arms around the needs in the schools. My biggest probably disappointment that could potentially come out of this is that we're putting our tax dollars into our schools and we're maintaining and we're building and we're embracing the needs of our community. Unfortunately, we may be tasked to have to pay for some of the other school districts that are not doing that. And I find that to be very unfortunate. There's nothing that has come to light. I just, saw the governor's comments on that. And I'd rather see us put our money where our mouths are and continue to protect our own community, as biased as that may sound. Shame on the communities that haven't done that.
I have one more question. I'm sorry. I know there's been discussion, especially at last night's meeting, about possibly moving the preschools into the elementary schools. Are you going to wait for that report from Robert before you assess that into your capital improvement plan? And then for the on the municipal side,
in what way would we be assessing that into our capital improvement plan?
If you had to make any adjustments construction-wise to the buildings,
So typically, when we moved the preschool from Hazard to Skip to South Road, the changes were small toilets, taking out the larger toilets, putting in the small toilets. That would need to happen unless in some of our elementary schools there are already classrooms with small toilets and small sinks. And then there would have to be an adjustment to the playground. And the adjustment to the playground, the last time we offset it with a grant opportunity, so we would explore there first.
Gotcha. Do you guys have a timeline that you have to accept your capital improvement plan by? Like for us, we have to accept it by a certain time. It can be changed afterwards, but we're required to approve it by a certain date.
So we have whatever your date is by charter, we have.
Okay.
We have an asset protection planning document that's very similar to this. We submit this for that need to the Rhode Island Department of Education, and that goes in May.
Okay, and you guys can make adjustments after that point without an issue? It's not.
We can always make adjustments on the out years, but we would need to certainly come to you for approval if we were going to make adjustments on the yellow, the current year.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Meg, if I could, I want to put a couple of things, I think, into focus in relation to how the school program fits within the overall capital improvement program. And we've talked about it over the last 2 nights that council's met about capital budget. But the entire program that was presented to you tonight should sound familiar because it's verbatim to what it was last year. And last year, what we said at that point was that budget only has the first 2 years that are approved projects from the state, which means that any of the projects in the last 4 years are what we are looking at for the facilities plan that is coming out of the legacy study and the RGB study. That means that what I've asked in the past is that serious consideration be given to, once the facilities plan is completed and adopted, whatever scenario is adopted by the school committee, that a capital program for the school fund be redeveloped. It's going to need to be redeveloped in conjunction with the town because the fiscal note associated with it will have to be reviewed as to where would the dollars come from to pay for those types of improvements. Right now, from a bonding perspective, we have $4 million in authorized bonding capability that the voters have approved for school purposes. In the capital improvement document that I've provided you, I've shown $2 million being put into bonding in the 2020 year, another $2 in the 2022 year. If the schools were to come back and to say we're going to do X, Y, Z based on the facilities plan, the analysis, this is what we want to submit to the state, it would require them, as Mary Ann's already said, to place an application to go forward, and with that application request the state to provide funding, housing funding. At the current time, that funding would be at about a 35% rate. As we've talked about, the state, in conjunction with the Department of Education, the Governor's Office, and the Treasurer's Office, have commissioned studies of all school buildings across the state and are looking at redeveloping the school housing aid formulas. Those formulas could start at 35% and go as high as 50 or 60% based on if there's energy improvements or there's building improvements that are going to consolidate or close buildings, those types of things. So my concern here is that if there is a facilities plan with multiple scenarios, one of the most important things that need to be considered before you deliberate on which works best for the school system is how does it fit within the overall financing available to the town. The other concern I have is that it would appear that if the formulas are going to change as far as housing aid is concerned, we won't really know what those changes are until probably the end of June because it'll go through the legislative session. If that occurs, it may delay even the application process and the scheduling that we've talked about. Right now, we're looking at, if they do not change the scheduling, the earliest that you would see approval of a new 5-year plan would be in June of 2019. If that plan called for funding in excess of $4 million in bond services, then it would require council authorization through the General Assembly to place an item on the ballot for 2020, Yeah, 2020. So there's a number of things that are going to occur here. The projects that are listed in the 18, 19, and the 19, 20 years, those 2 years, weren't advanced 2 years ago or last year for concern on not spending money on buildings that may or not be in use 5 years from now, since it's also a requirement that if you place bond money into a school and then the school ceases to be used for operations purposes, the reimbursements that are coming from the state aid disappear. We saw that ourselves with the South Road, and we weren't even, once we reopened South Road, able to get them to reconsider the remaining years that were on that debt with any type of proportionate share. So I guess the school department has done what we requested in terms of requesting the report to do the reviews, determine how education program fits into the facilities, and how the enrollment declines is going to impact educational programming. Unfortunately, when this capital program was put together, it simply was a restatement of what the last 2 years has been. I don't see improvements on any of the buildings until we have a full analysis completed by the school committee. My understanding is that on next Tuesday night, there will be the first discussions on the facilities, whether we're going to have cost estimates that are a component of the planning study is yet to be seen. It also is a case of where the school committee is going to come in terms of the number of questions. And I think it's not until early February that the final scenarios are supposed to come forward to the school committee. So my point is there's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and the summer. And I really recommend that the council and school committee consider the redevelopment of a capital improvement plan for a 6-year period, or even if it's going to be prospective for next year's capital budget, because you're going to need that before you go toward any applications going upstate. And in addition, you're going to need that for consultation with the council as far as what type of bonding authorization dollars will be available. You know, I've put it into what I think a proper perspective when I say, if we borrowed $1 million today on a 20-year schedule, and we had equal principal payments over that 20-year period, the first year would be, with 3%, would be $80,000. The second year it drops about $2,500, and it drops $2,500 thereafter because you're paying down a portion of your principal. If you borrow $10 million, you're talking about $800,000 in new debt service costs. Understand that what that means is that either one, $800,000 in new taxes are raised, two, costs are reduced in terms of operational expenses, or three, there's less dollars available for operations on either the school side or on the municipal side. And since you already have about a 75% share of the property tax, it certainly will have impact. The town of Barrington just went out with a 9.2% property tax increase for the current year. I'll say that again, 9.2%, because of the bonding implications associated with construction of the school. I certainly would fight tooth and nail to prevent that type of an action occurring in this community. So we need to be careful. What we need to also look at is how do you phase improvements and get to a point where it doesn't take away from your educational program and at the same time provide you with safe, secure facilities for the children. I think the other thing you may want to look at is there may be a number of improvements across all of your buildings, but you need to look at what buildings are the most secure in terms of future education service. Obviously, it's going to be your high school. If that's the case, then when you begin your prioritization, you may want to look at focused there so that you spending money in areas that you know are going to be there for the 20-year period. I also suggest that we need to understand how we integrate debt into the debt schedule. We could look at extended period debt for a 30-year on building improvements if they really had a 30-year life. That would reduce that 80,000 per million down to probably around, I'd say around 68 in the first year. But if you do that, all you're doing is delaying the ability for additional improvements 10 years or 15 down. My point is there's balance in everything. I'll say it as I've always said before. This is all a process. But if you don't do the long-term planning now, it's going to come back to haunt the system. And we need to ensure that a new capital plan that reflects the changes that are proposed and acceptable, because no outsider, no consultant should come in and tell you what to do. The school committee's elected to make that take that responsibility, and to work with the council as to how you balance what those needs are. And when we look at the fact that we've still got 3 years left with the education funding for the state aid going down, and we're now looking at next year's budget of around $950,000 that we're going to be down from what we are in the current year. There's some major cost implications to the community, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we've got to provide quality education. And how do we do that? The only way you're going to do that is if you work together and come up with solutions that are practical rather than just saying we need to do everything. So, as I say, I'm concerned that people not recognize this capital program as presented as being what's the intended purpose. Let's wait and see what the facilities analysis says. Let's wait and see what the scenarios are for building utilization, and let's wait and see what type of cost perspective is being advanced by the consultant for your consideration. But I would certainly hope that on Tuesday night, if that information is not available before that meeting, that you take it under revisement and ask the necessary questions as getting the detail. Rob will be there as your manager that evening. He has spent the time reviewing all of the documentation on the legacy report and the facilities plan, and I certainly think we'll be able to assist you in getting through this process. But this is probably the most important item that this town will be dealing with over the next 10 years, because it's going to not only set what the cost of education is going to be and the facilities cost of education is going to be, but the balance of how do we ensure that we're providing the best services for our kids. So I wish you a lot of luck with it, but understand that it's not going to be a simple process. I don't know, I mean, Rob, did you want to make comments at all? I know you've spent a lot of time on this with me and has met with the superintendent and gone over where we are with things, but if you want to hold your fire till Tuesday, that's great too. Okay, and one last item I wanted to mention. One of the things we're not considering tonight is the capital items that will fit in the school budget for next year that are not bond related. So those projects are out there. They are consistent with what they have been in past years. That's included in the capital budget on page 6-6. There's also a narrative that Mary Ann had put together that's in the large budget document. We are not considering it as part of the capital budget per se, only in the sense that, just like the council can, will adjust that based on how it fits into their operating budget for the 2018-19 year. but it is the same type of items that have been included there in past years on a pay-as-you-go basis. But if there's questions on that, it isn't on tonight's agenda, but it's certainly a part of capital spending that will impact the overall school budget in terms of property tax transfer for the 18-19 year.
I have a question for Roland and Scott. I'm just wondering if Robert has given you guys any indication if the presentation on Tuesday is going to include fiscal information attached to the projects.
I'm not sure we're going to see a Steve Alford level of report that says here's what each one looks like.
I wouldn't expect anybody to do
But
that.
even we could, and maybe Robert, I haven't seen any reports of his yet, but it might come out that way. We have, Kristen just mentioned that we will expect some financial information, but some of it is also this level, very easy to do some estimates and say here's what we think is going to happen. We know what things cost in general. We know what the fixed costs of buildings are. Those are part of it. We know what we already know what debt service might entail if we need to overhaul something or that kind of thing. So that's all baked in. Whether it's, like I said, it's not going to look like that.
No, I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to get like a build a new high school and like nothing about how much that might cost or anything.
Sure.
Two, yes, bonus.
Liz, there should be a cost estimate associated with any of these scenarios that they're going to be laying out. But understand, to go through the application process with the state is going to require detailed work to be done as far as the plans themselves. One of the other things that's going to be new that's coming forward is because municipalities and school districts haven't done a great job maintaining their facilities, they're also talking about incorporating into the legislation a requirement for a 3% budgetary set-aside equal to the percentage of for what the cost of the improvements are for maintenance purposes. Technically, we've already put that in place where we have a capital fund which is available for that type of maintenance, but it's also going to put a 3% cost factor on any of the improvements that we do make on any school buildings. So there's a number of moving parts that we're not going to know until we see the legislation. In a meeting with the League of Cities yesterday, their interpretation from RIDE and the interpretation that we received the day that we met with them have different interpretations as to where it's going to end. So I think there's a lot of things that are up in the air, but the only way to get ready for the change in the state program is to get a defined program that the community can support. Because if you don't get that, you're never going to get the bond issue passed.
Robert has asked for a great deal of financial information of late. He's asked for our capital planning items so that if there are facilities that he's not seeing being active in its current state for the life of our capital plan, I would imagine he'll use those as offsets to whatever new construction would be. RGB has in my understanding, has been working very closely with Robert over the last few weeks to put a price tag on each of his options in terms of any renovation or expansion of buildings. And there was another piece that our two organizations, the Rhode Island Superintendents Association and the Rhode Island Association of School Business Officials, tomorrow morning are hosting the governor and the treasurer and folks who will be speaking about the Jacobs report. So we're hoping to be able to ask some very specific questions of them at that time. And they're bringing forth a toolkit, which Mrs. Brousseau shared that they had brought forth to the Rhode Island Association of School Committees that we feel will have some valuable information that we can use when putting our scenarios forward. Robert also, I believe, is attuned to what financial incentives for housing aid we may or may not be able to take advantage of given certain scenarios. So I'm presuming that each of these scenarios will be energy efficient, more energy efficient sites. And so to my knowledge, we've never been able to access housing reimbursement at higher than a 35% rate that in my time here. But this may be an opportunity with the energy efficiencies, and if there are scenarios that have some newer and fewer concepts, we could see 50 to 60% reimbursement, which is, now is the time, quite frankly. I don't know that other communities, there are only a few other communities that are ready to take advantage of those first year rollout incentives to get going and make your facilities safer and better for the energy and better instructionally. And so I'm optimistic with that. But I think that Robert will have some tags.
I'm relieved to hear that. I just didn't want to see us in a scenario on Tuesday where he presents these great options and, we can't commit to any of them or even show enthusiasm on them without knowing how much they're going to cost the community. So I think it was Raisa that made the point, we don't want you to drop these things in our lap and then leave. And we're like, oh, I don't mean to be the bad guy, but that's not practical. Right. But thank you. I feel a little bit better about it, so thank you.
Roland, I've got a couple of questions on the document tonight, and I don't know who's better equipped to answer this, but 25% approximately of this entire program are the heating systems in West Kingston and Matunic. So I have a few questions. What's the physical plant now? What type of heat do we have in those buildings at this point?
It's electric heat.
Electric heat. And we're replacing them with?
At this point, it would be an electric heat.
I'm sorry?
Electric heat again.
Electric. Again.
The buildings went online in 1976, 75, 76 year. So the problem that they have at this point is replacement of some of the equipment.
Sure.
I am not wedded to the number of that $1,050,000 because if you've followed my capital and budget program for the last several years, that number was a number that we put as a placeholder several years ago, and when RGB reviewed it for the 5-year plan 3 years ago, they just picked up that number. So I'm not sure what that number is. I know Mary Ann has had documentation done for for a probable construction cost. It's coming in around that same number, but I'm not sure how. I never thought I could estimate that closely 8 years early and get RGB to agree with it, but I don't know why we need engineers. So, I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. But I also, if you recall last year, one of the recommendations I made was not to make those improvements in any building until we were sure that those buildings were going to be in operations for the next 10 years.
And so then the only comment I'll make is that we know what electric rates are and the cost of that sort of a system operationally. However, with the new solar arrays that we're putting on the landfills, I guess we'll be getting some credits for that, and that may offset a lot of the operational costs.
The department will be getting credits against their electric bill once that goes in place. But again, I'm not expecting them to start using the sunshine until probably the first quarter of the next fiscal year. So we may see some value to it, Joe, as a cut on the operations, but it's not going to be significant. When we looked at the different options for the heating facilities there, because there's no venting system that's currently in place there, and some of it has floor heating in the concrete itself, there was some questions on whether or not it would be much more expensive to go with a forced hot air system for that building. And remember that we've put two additions on that building. So the original core facility goes back to 76, but the two additions were later than that, so that the electrical component should be in better shape. And there is no air conditioning in those buildings at this point. So I'm not sure and that's not included.
That's not an option with electric. So
it's like the council chambers. There's just no HVAC.
it's almost as hot. Yeah.
Any other discussion here? Of course.
One other thing I want to make sure is clear is that one of the real problems with school construction is the limited season, because we're starting major construction subsequent to school closing and hopefully having it done before school opens. So if you don't have the bidding documents and a contractor hired 2 months in advance of mobilization, you're not going to get much work done.
Table? If anybody would like to, from the public, come up and speak, we certainly would welcome to hear your input. If anybody's interested, now would be the time to come up. Seeing none. Any other discussion? No? Okay. I guess this then will conclude.
If we're going to conclude, I just want to have one last word and say thank you to the school committee, for both you that sit at the table and all of your predecessors. It's been a long journey in terms of working with you. I've enjoyed it. And hopefully you'll continue to hear me in the back of your head saying it's a process and it takes money and it's got to stay in balance. But thank you.
Thank you. I know it's a lot of work. I don't have to have a motion to adjourn, so unless anything else needs to be discussed at this time, I think we're ready to close the session. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the work you've done. Thank you. I know it is not an easy process.